It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast, to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 43, I want to make sure to remind you guys to like and subscribe. Our podcast, Revved Up 906, is continuing to grow, and we want to keep on that path. So make sure to like and subscribe because that is helping you boys grow and develop in the Detroit Pistons community, and we love that. Also, shout out to Campfire Coworks because that is where our studio is located here downtown Marquette, Michigan. We've officially partnered up with them. They are an office sharing space here in Marquette, Michigan, and they can also help you grow your small business with networking opportunities. So make sure to follow Campfire Coworks on every social media platform. Also, we post clips and content all the time on Instagram and TikTok. So make sure to follow us on Instagram to be in the know daily about Detroit Pistons news and all of that sorts. Without further ado, episode number 43. There's a lot of trade talk following Bojan Bogdanovic as of recent. And overall in the Pistons community, not a lot going on. So we just wanted to take some time and kind of talk about, to start this episode, Bojan's first season with the Detroit Pistons last year. He averaged 21 points, nearly 4 rebounds, 2.6 assists, and 48% from the field. So before we get into trade talk, Bojan last season, we had a lot of positive and negatives. What comes to mind about Bojan's first season with the Pistons?
Positively speaking, we love how instant offense he is.
Yeah.
He's definitely one of the better three-point shooters in the league. He's one of the more well-rounded players in the league in what he's able to do day in and night out. He's just one of those guys that puts his head down, takes that shot, creates opportunities for others, and gets the job done. He's really an NBA vet. That's what you want out of a guy like this, is you want that experience, you want that knowledge, you want that firepower that he has. And so that's a positive. But there's also a lot of negatives to Bojan Bogdanovic. And that's not necessarily like, oh, I think he's a bad player, because I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's a good player. But there are some negatives that we did see this season where it's kind of like, well, I would like to see him maybe moved on from, because it would create opportunities for others. So, example, you have numerous times where Bojan's taken the shot, where you have a young guy like James Wiseman, or you have a young guy like Jalen Duren, or even Jaden Ivey, wide open and ready to shoot. And he still takes the shot. And the dude's taking like 20 to 30 shots a night. And it's like, Bojan, you have to understand, give these young bucks an opportunity to do something, because you might see something happen. Not only that, but it contributes to winning basketball. And there were a lot of positives from Bojan this season that helped us see the negatives of having a guy like that on our roster.
Yeah, we saw him rank 27th in points per game in the NBA. I love that top 30 stat line. But we saw him rank 103rd in the NBA in the assist category. To kind of prove your point, he only averaged 2.6 assists. And one of the biggest questions involving Bojan is how he will play with Cade Cunningham at the helm, playing point guard, because we have to remember when we saw Bojan take so many shots, 20, 25 shots a game last season, that was him on a team with the absence of Cade. With Cade at the point guard position running the offense, there's that huge question mark of where Bojan comes in, because he can either take a step back or continue what he did last season and take nearly 25 shots a game. Being a vet on this young team, I feel like he took it upon himself to be the guy that holds the offense to lots of points. And like I said, I like the 21 points a game, but I just don't know how it will mix with Cade Cunningham. And watching the team all season last year, I predict that it won't mix well, and that's why I also want a trade.
Now, I will say, I don't want him to be traded. I wouldn't mind him being traded, but I'm not going like, oh, dude, I don't want you on the Pistons. No, I want him. I just want him to take on the role of just being a catch and shoot guy. When you need offense, you go to him.
Yeah.
But when you don't need him, he's not that main focal point. We don't want him to be the focal point of the offense. We want Cade to be the focal point. We want Jalen Duren. We want James Wiseman. We want Jaden Ivey. We want Nassar Thompson. We're going to want a lot of these young bucks to be the focal point of our offense, not a 34-year-old that's going on 35. That there's, okay, realistically, the reason why I would want him to be moved is because of his age. If he was younger and playing like he is, keep him. By all means, keep him. If he's 27 and doing this, I want him on our roster. There's no reason for him not to be here. But him sitting there at 34, where it's like the perfect time of a decline in a vet. He's been in the league for a while now, for 10 years now. You're going to start slowing down your game a little bit, especially being 34 years old, going on 35. I believe he goes on, he goes on 35 in April next year, but by the end of his contract extension with us, he'll be 37 years old.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to want a 37-year-old in the league.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to want that. Unless you're an off chance like a Kevin Love, nobody's going to want you. And so I think right now is the perfect opportunity to move on from him, and that's why I want him to be traded.
And I can see the comments now, but guys, he's not a pass-first small forward. I understand he's not a pass-first guy. He wants to take those shots. But to me, he hasn't even proven that he can work with ball movement. Like, I just don't see him helping out the ball movement and making sure that everybody is touching the ball and gets their touches. For me, if I was a coach, I want to make sure at least 3-4 guys are touching the ball before a shot goes up. That's just one thing that I would coach. And I don't think Bojan can really follow that scheme. So for me, I just don't see it working with Cade. But I could easily see Troy Weaver and Monty wanting that 21 points a game. I get it. That's really valuable. It's hard for NBA players to get over that 20-point mark in averaging. And Bojan's done it multiple seasons now. And knowing that you're going to get that out of him and knowing that you're going to get that consistency, I like that, especially in a young team. And I know Troy and Monty are going to like that. But I just think having a guy like him that demands the ball so much can be detrimental to the roster overall. So let's get into the trade that was proposed. This is a trade that Zach Buckley of Bleacher Report reported on. We don't know how serious or how likely this is to happen, but let's get into the logistics. The Memphis Grizzlies would receive Bojan Bogdanovic, and then the Detroit Pistons would receive Zaire Williamson going into his third season, and then veteran Brandon Clark, and a 2026 first-round pick, a.k.a. a top 5 protected pick. Very interesting. Let's get into this first player, Zaire Williams. He averaged, let's see, I lost his averages. Do you have them by chance? You list off his averages for us.
His averages. He averaged pretty much 6 points a game, 2 rebounds, an assist, and shot 43% through 37 games this past season. Career-wise, he's averaged 7 points, 2 rebounds, and assists, and shot 45% from the field. He's one of those weird wings that is uber athletic, great defender, struggles at time to time from an offensive standpoint, but he's one of those young guys that you want to have on your team to be at least in a rotation kind of player. He's the reason why he hasn't played a whole lot is because he's been injured. And while he was in college, he wasn't bad. Like, he was one of those top guys at Stanford, was one of those key ball dominant, like, I'm going to lock you down, but also hit that shot. And he was a 10th overall pick in the draft in 2021 with the Pelicans. Obviously, he's playing with the Grizzlies, but even with the Grizzlies, what he's done thus far, there are flashes of a lockdown defender, top defender in the league category. And you look at what the Grizzlies have done in the last couple of years. They just had Jaren Jackson Jr. win Defensive Player of the Year. They now bring in a guy like Marcus Smart, who's won Defensive Player of the Year himself. They had Dylan Brooks, who was known for his defense while there. Like, that team is very defensive-minded.
Yeah.
And so when you get a player like Zaire Williams on a young team like we are, who's lacking defense, but just added a SAR, imagine adding a guy like Zaire Williams in, who is another lockdown defender. I think the possibility of getting more defensive players on our team is what it takes for us to win. Because, we have offense, right? We need... Nowadays, offense wins championships. But I think now, more than ever, the only way we, as a team and an organization, are going to make a winning case in the NBA and be a staple in the NBA is our defense. Historically speaking, the bad boys, what were they known for? Defense. What were the Golden Works Pistons known for? Defense. I think we still got to stay in that realm and be a defensive-minded team. And that's what I think we're going to get here if we get a guy like Zaire Williams in.
When I saw this trade idea, I was a little bit shocked to see Zaire Williams involved in this trade. I mean, he's a 6'8", 22-year-old, 215 pounds, known for being a lockdown defender. But then I started looking at the statistics a little bit. His rookie year averaged 8.1 points and then played 62 games. That's all right. Missed quite a few games there, but from a rookie, that's going to happen, especially a young rookie of his build. They're going to deal with injuries here and there. But then we see in his second season, 5.7 points a game, so took a little bit of a drop there. His steals per game took a drop. Everything kind of just went down a notch, and then only played 37 games. So like you said, didn't play very many games last year. I'm assuming that's why he's on the trading block. I'm kind of shocked that the Memphis Grizzlies would give up on him so soon. I think he's the kind of guy that has the build and the raw talent to be able to build him into something great. And we see with the Pistons coaching staff this year that Monty's bringing in, they're going to be really good at developing guys. Maybe Memphis just simply doesn't want to develop him. But Detroit, with so many other 22-year-old young guys on their roster, they have time to develop a guy like Zaire Williams. I think that getting a guy like him and putting him alongside Asar, not just on the court, but in the practice facility, and have those two guys competing against each other every day is only going to produce good stuff, because they're two competitive young guys, uber athletic, ultra good at defense. You put those two guys competing every day against each other in the gym, only greatness can come out of that, I believe.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think this is necessarily Memphis giving up on him. I think this is more of like, what is it going to take that next step in being a contender in the NBA?
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. I don't think they're necessarily giving up on him. I think it's just like, if they had an opportunity to get a player like Bojan to add instant offense to their already defensive-minded team, like, that would be such a huge advantage. I mean, when you add in like Marcus Smart this offseason, who's going to be a key staple for you, that not only is a lockdown defender, but can make good passes every single night out there. And then you even have John Morant, who's one of the most uber athletic guards in the league, who is instant offense, but is great on defense. You have Jaren Jackson Jr., who can ball out offensively, but is still defensive minded. And you have Steven Adams, who does everything for you and more. Like, that team is just loaded. Why not add a sharpshooter in there that is instant offense in Bojan? So realistically, I don't see this as Memphis giving up on him. I think this is just them realizing, like, okay, obviously we love Zaire, but I think in order to take this next step, guys, we gotta add in some offensive playmaking, and that's what Bojan is. So I don't think it's necessarily them giving up on him. I just think it's them seeing the opportunity present itself and adding a guy like Bojan in there, who is a vet and who can facilitate in the sense of being one of those good shooters day in and night out that can just get you buckets. I don't see them giving up on Zaire. It's just, I think this is a possibility that they need to take.
The second part of this trade, we see the Pistons receiving Brandon Clark, 6'8", 215 pounds, 26 years old, out of Gonzaga. Last year averaged 10 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1.3 assists, and 65% from the field. All you subscribers know that I love to see efficient basketball, so I love to see that 65% from the field. But 6 months ago, in March against the Denver Nuggets, tore his left Achilles in a loss to the Denver Nuggets. So this guy coming off another injury. But I like Brandon Clark because I was talking to Ryan about this when we were arriving at Campfire, that I liked Brandon Clark because there's always those mid-level players in the NBA that always scorch the Pistons. There's like a couple, like one guy on each team that's like a mid-level player that just always scorches us, and that's Brandon Clark. I've always loved his play when he goes up against us. And what I like about him is he doesn't just offer that rebounding. He has a lot of moves in the paint. And I think, much like my point with Asar Thompson and Zaire Williams, I think putting Brandon Clark in the gym with Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duren, those three young guys just banging bodies in the paint, fighting for rebounds every day, I think adding a guy that has a work ethic like Brandon Clark would be very beneficial for the Detroit Pistons. So this trade doesn't necessarily involve just production on the court. It's behind the scenes too. I think these are two young men, Zaire and Brandon, that if you add them to your team, look at what they did in Memphis while they were there. Brandon Clark has only been there a couple of years now, and these two young men have witnessed winning basketball in the Western Conference. So I love that because they have that winning mentality early in their career. They're used to traveling around the country, beating up on teams. And to bring in a couple of young guys that just have that aura to them and adding them to the Pistons, I don't really see much wrong going about that. And then Brandon Clark isn't going to demand a lot of ball time. He's not a guy that is going to catch it in the paint and be a black hole and just throw up shots. He's a guy that can work within an offense. And we saw with the going to work Pistons, with the Bad Boys Pistons, these historic teams for the Pistons organization, be able to move the ball. And I think that's going to be a key to success for this young Pistons team, is moving the ball, get everybody involved. We know that we have a lot of young talent, but Cade isn't going to be able to do everything. He can't hold the weight of the team on his back. In today's NBA, these teams are too good. Everyone needs to get involved, and a guy like Brandon Clark can help with that pass first and tough defense mentality.
Yeah, so when you break down our team, you're going like, yeah, we're big heavy, we're guard heavy. There's no in between. But successful teams, historically speaking, never have too many bigs. They never do. Like, there's a laundry list of bigs that are on that team, more than guards. And obviously they're probably going into this season going like, let's see what our guys can do guard-wise. Let's see what our bigs can do. Because I think they found their in-between, because I think Asar is that guy. I think potentially Joe Harris being a backup in that situation is a solid pickup. So I think you could honestly play, obviously you would add Zaire into the wing department, but I think you could even move Brandon Clark into the wing department too. Historically speaking, he's been a power forward in the NBA, but while he was in college, he was a 3-4. Like, he played the 3 a lot at Gonzaga. So I think he could go back to that role. But seriously though, like, Brandon Clark would automatically take Marvin Bagley out of consideration right off the get-go, because I think if this were to happen, Marvin Bagley, you're gone. I think Isaiah Livers would be gone. I think there would be those two at least freed up, shipped out, whatever, because Brandon Clark instantly replaces both of them, like, combined.
Right.
But the production you get out of Brandon Clark night in and night out, like, rookie year, averaged 12 points a game. That's pretty darn good for a rookie, given the fact that he was drafted 21st overall. Like, that's not bad at all. He's just been one of those stellar players. And his minutes, I mean, he's been averaging 20 to 25 minutes a game his entire career thus far. And obviously, he's been a little shaken up, dealing with injuries year in and year out. But I think that's just because the Grizzlies, the last 4 years, he's been one of those go-to guys just because of where their team has been. So, like, when he comes in as a rookie, the Grizzlies aren't ready to compete yet. They're still one of those younger teams that are just fighting their way through the Western Conference. Year 2, they're still in that little bubble. But then last year, they start making strides to take that next step to be a contending team. And then this past year, they're trying to compete for the playoffs to be one of those contending teams. So I think really what it comes down to is that they've just relied on him so much so that he's kind of like one of those injury-prone players where he's getting injured a lot. But that's just because of how involved he is. Whereas in Detroit, he can play a Marvin Bagley role and not be involved as much and still be one of those key guys. I kind of see, it's a weird comparison, but I kind of see him being like a Vinnie Johnson with the Pistons here, in just the sense that you know what you're going to get out of him off the bench, but honestly, he could start for you too. But that's what I see out of Brandon Clarke. I see him challenging these guys and just being one of those key staples off the bench for us.
Make sure to comment below what you think, if you would like to add Zaire Williams and Brandon Clarke to the Detroit Pistons, if you could see that happening. Make sure to comment below your thoughts. With this trade, the third part of this trade that the Pistons would be getting, we see a value of the protected top 5 pick for the 2026 draft. So I want to talk about the value of that because, I mean, 2026, it seems far away, but it's really not. 2.5 years, 2 seasons. I think for me, if a couple of these guys don't pan out, say Isaiah Stewart gets traded, say James Wiseman doesn't work out, he gets traded, a couple of these guys just absolutely bomb. But then this draft, 2026 draft shows up, and then all of a sudden we have a top 5 pick, and all we did was trade away a 34-year-old Bojan Bogdanovic. Tempting to me for sure, because it's kind of like a safety policy. If this, and this don't work out, we still have that top 5 pick. So like for me as a fan, I like having that buffer because of course I'm gonna pray and hope that all our young guys work out. But if I'm a gambling man, I'm gonna gamble that a couple of these guys might not pan out. And I would love to know that we have that protected top 5 pick.
Yeah. Just having the safety net alone on this trade is just, you can't ask for more. The fact that you'd be getting 2 stud young players with a safety net of a top 5 protected first-round pick, you can't argue with that for giving up Bojan. And I know the reports have said, like the Pistons are expecting 2 first-round picks and everything. And I wouldn't turn down 2 first-round picks, but I'd rather add guys with potentially high value with Zaire Williams and Brandon Clarke here, while also acquiring a future first-round pick.
Right.
Like, there's no way you say no to that. Like, if I'm playing 2K and I see this trade pop up, I'm going, well, I do like Bojan Bogdanovic. He is one of my better players. But the upside here with Zaire Williams and Brandon Clarke, while also getting a future first-round pick, there's no way I can say no to that. Right. It's a no-brainer to me. But then you also look at guys coming out who could be in the 2026 draft class. You have guys like Cameron Boozer. You have his brother there, where I just saw it. Caden Boozer. You have the Boozer brothers, but a.k.a. Carlos Boozer's sons. But then you also have Kyan Anthony, who is Carmelo's son. You have Bryce James, LeBron James' son there. So like this draft class coming through, have some top high-end players. And honestly, I wouldn't turn down any of those guys. I really wouldn't. I mean, obviously, I'm not turning down a top high-end pick, but I'm not saying I'm like, oh, I want Cameron Boozer. I'm not saying I want that. I'm not saying I want any specific player right now, but the fact that you have a chance at drafting one of these high-end players, one of those top 5 guys, a couple of years from now, just for trading Bojan away,
Yeah.
like you can't say no to that.
Yeah, I agree. To kind of flip the coin a little bit and talk about what the Memphis Grizzlies would be receiving with Bojan, I want to talk about the dynamics of Bojan mixing with the Grizzly players. You kind of mentioned earlier Marcus Smart getting signed or traded to the Memphis Grizzlies. And I think Marcus Smart's the kind of point guard that will mix very well with Bojan. Marcus is a guy that's not a shoot first. He's a pass and D guy. And put him alongside Bojan Bogdanovic, he's going to be able to find Bojan in the sweet spots around the three-point line. And then also, we see Marcus Smart use a lot of moving. He moves with a purpose constantly. Bojan, we saw, passed pretty well between Alec Burks and Jaden Ivey. Those are 2 guys that are kind of in the same essence of moving throughout the offense, just whether it's moving from spot to spot. We see Bojan work very well with those guys. And then, of course, Ja Morant, he's going to be missing quite a few games next season, but when he does return, he's a guy that, yes, he's explosive on the offensive side, but I've seen him make some pretty impressive passes. And a guy like Bojan, I think him knowing that Ja Morant is a superstar will make him take a step back. And I think on a winning team, he will be able to accept a role that's given to him. I think we just saw him demand the ball so much because he was on a young Pistons team, kind of out of place at times. So he was just like, all right, man, we've lost 10 games in a row. Let me just start putting up my shots. And you know what? I get it. But on a team like Memphis, I think he's going to be able to find his role because we saw him do that with the Utah Jazz 2 seasons ago. I think it would be very beneficial for Bojan to go to the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, when you look at their roster, like the fact that they added in Marcus Smart per trade this year, like you can't say no to that. But then they also added in Derrick Rosen. They added in a couple different guys. They had a couple good picks. But you look at their summer league squad, some of these key guys that we saw tear it up. You see like Kenneth Lofton's taking that next step. You see Jake LaRavia taking that next step. You see David Roddy taking that next step. Mm-hmm. They have a bunch of good high-end key pieces that are very solid, that you add a guy like Bojan into the mix of those young guys, but then you add him into a mix of Desmond Bane, former Piston Luke Kennard, Santi Aldama. Like, you look at that roster, even with Steven Adams and, like I said, Jaren Jackson Jr. earlier and John Conchar, like this team is built to win. Yeah. When you add a guy who's instant offense, no matter what point of the game, like Bojan, you can't turn down that opportunity. They have shooters, obviously, in Desmond Bane and Luke Kennard, but then when you add a guy who can do a little bit more than what those two can do in Bojan, there's no way you're saying no to that.
So we talked about the players, their stats, and the dynamics of them being on their respective teams if this trade did indeed happen. Make sure to comment below whether you would accept this trade. Ryan, would you accept this trade?
Well, as I said, make my 2K reference, or just in the fact that I think this is a win-win trade, I would say yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think we get 2 more projects. Well, I think Zaire is more of a project. And I think the coaching staff, as it is, heading into this new season, they're going to be heading into training camp soon when they're doing 2-a-days, they're going to be grinding. I think adding another guy like Zaire might overwhelm the coaching staff. It's a lot to take in with all these young guys under 25. We have like 8-9 guys under 25, which is a lot. But Zaire coming off an injury, he might still be having that lingering issues with the injury. I don't know if he would come back to the season right away. I would accept this trade. I think the protected top 5 pick, honestly, if they were like protected top 5 pick for Bojan, I'd probably accept that. I mean, I would probably just take it because then there's a lot less of a headache on this team. And I feel like Bojan's a headache at times because there were so many times last season watching the Revved Up recaps where we're like, what is Bojan doing? He's ignoring James Wiseman. James Wiseman looks visibly frustrated, and he's just choosing to ignore him. So for me, I would accept this trade, take in the 2 under 30-year-olds and ship out the 34-year-old. And it's also doing right by Bojan. We're not trading him to a bad situation. We saw a couple years back, Derrick Rose asked to go to a playoff team, and we traded him to the Knicks, who were kind of on that buffer squad. I wasn't really happy with the way we treated Derrick Rose in that trade. You always want to be careful who you are sending, what teams you're sending vets to. I think we'd be doing right by Bojan. We'd take him and accept his 21 points a game, thank him for that one season, ship him off to Memphis, and hopefully maybe they can chase a ring by chance, and then everyone's, walks off into the sunset. So yeah, I think I would accept this trade. That will do it for episode number 43. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe. We will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.